Hi, and welcome to today's session. In this session, we'll be talking about Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam and tips and tricks around it. So as we start, we'll be going through the study guide on sharelearn.net. When you're going through it, we recommend you go through the sign-in. Just click on it. It'll take you to the profile after you give the permission of your Google account. Although that is not required, at times it won't let you access the guide unless you're signed in. So once you're signed in, let's go to Linux Foundation exams. And there we have Certified Kubernetes Administrator Study Guide. Click on Read More, and here you are on the front page. So we're just talking about what is Certified Kubernetes exam, how critical it is, how helpful it is for your journey in your career. This is a live document, so we keep updating it regularly. Consider adding it to your bookmarks so you can come back to it if you're planning to prepare for Certified Kubernetes Administrator program. So CKA was created by CNCF in collaboration with Linux Foundation. CKA is not an easy exam for sure. The exam has tasks instead of questions like other exams. So in most of the exams you come through, you will be getting multiple choice questions, but here you will be working on practical tasks. Questions provide details on what needs to be implemented. Candidates are expected to configure it in the provided environment. And whoever is considering for CKA exam should have hands-on experience with Kubernetes. So the first question comes into the mind before you're planning to prepare for CKA, is it worth it? As one of the highest velocity projects in the history of open source, Kubernetes is definitely exploding. The CNCF is committed to growing the community of Kubernetes application developer, thereby enabling continued growth across the board. Its adoption is growing very fast. It provides power to administrator for how to infrastructure resources. It provides power to administrator over how to infrastructure resources are used. CKA is one of the best DevOps certification with practical exam environment. You may make above 100K annual salary once you complete this. And as per ZipRecruiter and PayScale, the average salary could be well above $116,000. So how much does a CKA exam cost? CKA cost $375 with free one retake. So the way it works is you pay $375 to CNCF, and they will let you take the second attempt to the exam for free. Feel free to give comments for your questions. We'll definitely take them as they come and at the end of the session as well. So most of the discounts for this exam come during Cyber Monday, and it was discounted to up to 65% this time, but they have been expired, so you don't have the discounts anymore. They were extended to December 8th. In fact, the deadline was December 6th. For future offers, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook group so you can get the latest update on it. Now, where can I practice CKA exam? For CKA exam, we have lab covering CKA exam. So if you go to our website, sharelearn.net, and go to practice Kubernetes labs, we are working on more labs over here, so you could definitely come here and check out the free labs with a free environment along with it. Also, they give you access to killer.sh It's a CKA exam simulator, so you can try over there. How long does the CKA exam take? How much time you have to complete it? You get 2 hours to complete the CKA exam. So how long is the exam, the certification valid? It's for 3 years. Which version of Kubernetes will be used in CKA exam? The current version used is 1.22. Make sure you check the latest guide, a CKA exam guide, or our guide on CKA to check what is the current version being used in the exam before you attempt for it. So when can I retake the exam? So you get a one attempt to take within the 12 months of the purchase. How many questions are there in CKA exam? So you will get around 15 to 20 performance-based tasks. So you'll be asked to create certain objects or do a troubleshooting or multiple objects in a task, which you get in the CKA exam. So what is the exam syllabus? Exam covers cluster architecture, installation, and configuration 25 with the 25% weightage, workload and scheduling with 15%, services and networking with 20%, storage with 10%, and troubleshooting with 30%. And we'll be going in detail on this topic. So what courses we recommend to go for CKA exam? Definitely a Udemy course by Momshad Manamat is mostly recommended. It has the practical guides and they provide you from Code Cloud, which is their website, a practical exercise option as well. edX also option a free introduction to Kubernetes course. CNCF has a course on Kubernetes fundamental, which is a paid course, but it's also a good one. You can also consider buying a bundle, and the discount are not there right now, but they come and go. So we recommend check back this guide when you're looking for discounts as well. What is the passing score for CKA? You have to score at least 66% or above to earn a pass in the exam. Exams are scored automatically, usually within 24 hours of completion. The result will be emailed to you. So is the CKA open book exam? Yes, it is. So you will have access to kubernetes.io docs. You will have access to GitHub Kubernetes page. And you will have access to blogs as well and their subdomain. So you can go anywhere in the docs, in the GitHub page, and on the blog page. But you cannot go onto the discussions page for sure. And you can go to multiple language. It's not only limited to English language. So if you have a language preference, you can go to your own language Kubernetes IO page as well. There's only one tab allowed, so you cannot open the second tab. So you'll have an exam tab, Kubernetes IO, or GitHub Kubernetes, or Kubernetes IO blog page, but there's only 2 tabs you can have at one point. And it is a responsibility of the candidate to make sure that the proctor will gonna warn you and probably invalidate your exam if you try to open a third page and did not listen to their warning. Even if you accidentally open the Discuss Kubernetes, try to close it as soon as possible because you might get a warning for it and even invalidation of your exam. Where can I find resources for individual topic of CKA exam? So we'll be going through those, but yeah, they are listed here as well if you want to go on a particular one. So let's go to cluster architecture, installation, and configuration. So the first topic is manage role-based access control. And in this guide, you will see we have linked the Kubernetes IO page for RBAC. So if I click on it, it'll take you to the RBAC page on kubernetes.io. Similarly, if I click on any of the link, it'll take you to the respective topics on the kubernetes.io. Another topic covered is use kubeadm to install basic cluster, manage a high available Kubernetes cluster, provision underlying infrastructure to deploy Kubernetes cluster, perform a version upgrade on a Kubernetes cluster using kubeadm, and we do have a lab for that. We're working on adding a lab for individual topics, so you will get to see a lab option over here, which you can click and it'll take you to the lab page for the particular topic. Another topic covered in this section is implement etcd backup and restore. etcd is the key store or the storage for the Kubernetes control plane where all the information of changes you have made to the cluster are kept. So how do you take a backup and restore? We do have a lab for it and a link to Kubernetes IO page. So a question came in, can I search in the kubernetes.io? Yes, you can. You can always, even during the exam, you have an option to search, but the results will be giving you discuss.kubernetes.io and other pages as well. Make sure you do not click on any of those. It's your responsibility to make sure you're not clicking on the link which are not allowed during the exam, even if they come in the search result of kubernetes.io. So next section is workloads and scheduling. The topics covered under this are understand deployment and how to perform rolling update and rollbacks. Use config map and secrets to configure applications. Know how to scale applications. Understand the primitives used to create robust self-healing application deployments. Understand how resource limits can affect pod scheduling, awareness of manifest management and common templating tools. Next section is services and networking. Understand host networking configuration on cluster nodes. Understand connectivity between the pods, how the communication works between the pods in a cluster. Understanding cluster IP, node port, load balancer service types, and endpoints. Know how to use ingress and ingress resources. Know how to configure and use core DNS. Choose an appropriate container networking interface plugins. Next section is storage. So the topics covered under this section are understand storage class persistent volumes, understand volume mode, access modes, and reclaim policies for volumes. We will be going in more details in the future videos, but feel free to click on the links here for Kubernetes IO page, and we'll be adding labs pages over here as well. And feel free to submit a feedback over here on any of the thing which you find incorrect, or you have a good resource which we can attach to, which could be used by others. Know how to configure application with persistent storage is the last topic in this section. And the last section here is troubleshooting. Evaluate cluster and node logging, understand how to monitor applications, manage container std out and std error logs. So how do you manage the logs? Troubleshoot application failure, troubleshoot cluster component failure, troubleshoot networking. So here, this is the most important section of the guide, and let's go through it. So what are the tips for CKA exam? CKA is an open source open book exam. Use resources available to you. So when you're stuck, make sure you use the kubernetes.io page, and you feel free to search a topic over there. Although the time is very limited, you only have 120 minutes to complete 15 to 20 tasks. Even if you try to read it 3 times, you'll be out of time. So be very careful of your time. If you're not able to complete things in a proper manner, just skip to the next one. And make sure you check the first question, just quick glance, and last question. And you can always flag the questions either way, whether you feel they are the most, you're most comfortable with them, or they are the most hard one. Just prefer your strategy and go ahead and flag them. That way you can strategize how you want to do the exam, whether you will start with the most easy ones or the most hard ones. We would recommend you go with the most easy one, the one you think you can cover in few minutes, but just be very cautious about your time, because that is the most limited resource in your exam. You have an open book, so you can exam could, if somebody gives you 8 hours or 10 hours, you can easily do the exam, but it's only 120 minutes is what you get. So practice using the Kubernetes documentation to do the tasks. When you're doing the task, make sure you refer to the Kubernetes documentation so that you are used to it and you know where things are. And if you prepare a long way ahead, like 6 months or 8 months ahead, make sure you review those, because they might have changed by now. Kubernetes is changing very frequently, and the later 1.23 is already in the release phase. It's coming out soon. So make sure, eventually it'll be added to the exam and the version will be changed from 1.22 to 1.23. Make sure you prepare for that part as well. So another tip is you get points for partial task. So in a task, they might ask you to create a pod, expose the pod, and then attach a pod or a deployment crate around it. So you will get a point for partial tasks. So don't think that you just don't attempt it. Do whatever you think you can achieve in the time allocated to you. Again, time is very valuable. Just reading the questions too long will run you out of time. So don't get stuck to one task. Mark it to revisit. And this is a major misconception around the exam, that you have to use VI. Unless you're very good at it, don't even try to use it. There is a notepad available in the exam on the top right section of the exam panel, and use it. It's much easier to use your keyboard and mouse than going into the VI unless you're very familiar with it. You'll be working on a lot of YAML files and maybe taking a sample from the kubernetes.io and further modifying it. So make sure you use the notepad and not the VI unless you're already expert in VI and that's what you prefer to do. So one thing, the test system detects if you try to cover your face and make beeping noise. Just be aware of it. It's very annoying when you do it for the first time. So be aware that if there is a sound coming out beyond your control, the system will detect it and there will be a beeping sound. The proctor has the control over it. So if he sees you are not the one making it, definitely he will let you proceed with the exam. But try to be in an area where you don't have any extra sounds coming in. Don't try to cover your face during the exam, because that will be a violation and might lead to a warning and then further invalidation of your attempt. As this is a home-based test, be careful, inform family, housemates, adjust tests, and avoid sound during tests. No matter how reliable your internet connection is, be prepared prepared for the disconnection and have a phone handy or a hotspot to reconnect, that is completely acceptable during the exam. That if you happen to get disconnected and connect back, you might not get your time back. So it is 2 hours if your internet get disconnected and it took you 15 minutes to reconnect. You might not get that 15 minutes. So just be aware of it. That's why have a backup in terms of internet connection and the computer if you need to have one. The proctor, before your exam is started, we're gonna ask you to show your surroundings with the webcam, and they're very rigorous about it. So they're gonna ask you to go below, show it below your table where you're putting your laptop. They will ask you to show around, behind, and they might ask to go in more details on one particular section. So be comfortable with that. Be prepared for it, as you might be very anxious during to start the exam, especially the time conscious come into the period. But this is before the exam. You can join the exam session 15 minutes before the scheduled time. So come join in, make sure you get all these validation done with your IDs and other things, and be prepared to start the exam. So next is, what are the system requirements for CKA exam? It is delivered online. Candidate must provide their own computer with the current version of the Chrome browser. So you will be taking this exam over the Chrome browser, and you will have access to the second tab as well. Make sure you have the third-party cookies turned on. For the duration of the exam, you have a reliable internet access. Ensure others on the same internet connection are not performing activities that use excessive bandwidth. So try to inform your family members or roommates to not use the video conferencing calls or streaming during the exam time, as that might interrupt your exam. During the exam, there is a video stream going from your computer to the proctor, and an audio stream going to the proctor. And if there is a distraction in those, the proctor will gonna invalidate or cancel the session. A wired connection is more stable and robust than a wireless connection. Turn off the bandwidth intensive use. So for the microphone, please check to make sure it is working before you start the exam session. You need a webcam. Ensure the webcam is capable of being moved, as a proctor may ask you to plan your surroundings to check potential violation of exam policy. So as I said earlier, they will be asking you to show you 360 degree on what is the area you're giving exam into. They might ask you to show below your table as well, and the cables. And if there's any drawer in your table, they're gonna ask you to show that. So try holding up your ID while viewing your webcam feed to ensure your placement and resolution are sufficient for the person viewing the feed to read it. So you can do that beforehand to check whether the resolution of your webcam is good enough for the exam by putting your ID in front of it, and make sure you can read it. So if you're testing in your office, please ensure the streaming will be allowed using WebRTC. If for some reason your employer doesn't allow it, that'll be a challenge to give the exam. So candidates are not allowed to have other applications or browser windows running except one on which exam is being shown and the one which is allowed for the Kubernetes. So you'll have only one application open, that'll be browser, and the second tab for the open book section of it. You should run compatibility check tool to verify that their hardware meets the minimum requirement. So when you go to the exam website, you have a hardware compatibility check where you can see if your laptop meets the minimum requirements. What kind of access will I have to the environment during CKA exam? So you will have root privilege. You can obtain it by sudo-i command. You can reboot your server. Do not stop or tamper the process inside the exam, as it might end your exam session. Do not block incoming ports 8080, 4505, and 4506. That includes firewall rules that are found within the distribution default firewall configuration that might hamper within the exam environment. Use Control-Alt-W instead of Control-W. Control-W is a keyboard shortcut that will close the current tab in Google Chrome. So Control-Alt-W, we're going to do the closure of the tab within the exam environment. Control-C and Control-V are not supported in your exam terminal, so you might have to copy and use the Command-C and Command-V, or in Windows, you have the Windows option to do that. Select the text for copy and middle button for paste. So use the right clicks to do the copy and paste rather than Control-C and Control-V. For Mac, you can use Command-C and Command-V. For Windows, you can use Control-Insert to copy and Shift-Insert to paste. So when let's say you're taking some data and you're taking it from your notes to the terminal, make sure you use the commands which are provided here of Control-Insert to copy and Shift-Insert to paste, rather than using your regular Control-C and Control-V, as they will not be allowed, or they won't work. Again, they're repeating the same thing. In addition, you might find it helpful to use Notepad. See the top menu under Exam Controls to manipulate text before pasting to the command line rather than using the VI. If you're an expert in VI, feel free to use it. Otherwise, Notepad has been the best for all the candidates we have talked to and worked with. They have really appreciated the tip of using the Notepad. Installation of services and application included in this exam may require modification of security settings, policies to successfully complete the exam. So you might have to install a certain extension on Chrome or an application to make sure the integrity of the exam is maintained. So make sure you have admin access to the system you're working with. Only a single terminal console is available during the exam. Terminal multiplexers such as tmux can be used to create virtual consoles. So you can use a tmux, but you'll have access to only one terminal, and then you'll be going to different clusters from that. So it's like a jump host you use in your environment. You go to that server, and then you go to different servers from there. So how many Kubernetes clusters are there in CKA exam environment? So each task of exam must be completed on a designated cluster, and configuration context is how you will be switching between the clusters. To minimize switching, the tasks are grouped so that all the questions on a given cluster appear consecutively. So you'll be, let's say you're working on the first cluster, all the next questions might be on that cluster, then you'll be switching to the next cluster, and you'll be going to the next. So they're not trying to confuse you on that part. They understand it's a very limited time exam. There are 6 clusters in CKA exam, and these are the details. So the first one will have 1 master and 2 workers, and we'll be using Flannel for the CNI. And similarly, you have the other clusters as well. So try to get yourself familiar with the clusters you might have around it. Let us know if you have any questions in the comments. Make sure you like this video. Let's go to the next one. So how will I know which cluster to use for a task in CKA exam environment? At the start of each task, you'll be provided with the command to ensure you are on the correct cluster to complete the task. So before you start implementing the task, make sure you go to the particular context. It doesn't hurt if you think you're on that one to do it again, because it will not change anything, but it'll make sure that changes you're making is on that particular cluster. At the start of each task, you'll be provided nodes making up each cluster can be reached via SSH using the commands such as SSH. You can assume the elevated privilege by using sudo-i. You can also use sudo to execute command with elevated privilege at any time. So you can either switch to the root user, or you can go to you just use the sudo command to implement it. You must return to the base node after completing each task. Nested SSH is not supported, so you cannot go to the jump host, another node, and then another node. You have to come back to the jump host. That'll be node 1 in the exam. So make sure you do that, and that's the only node you can switch the context from. So all the other nodes are specific to that cluster. You cannot switch. They don't have the configuration for you to be able to switch the context. You can use kubectl and appropriate context to work on any cluster from the base node. When connected to a cluster member via SSH, you will only be able to work on that particular cluster via kubectl. So when you go to a master of a particular cluster, you'll not be able to switch other clusters from there because the configuration does not exist there. For your convenience, all exam, in other words, the base system and the cluster nodes have following additional command line tools. So you have kubectl with kalias and bash autocompletion. You have JQ for YAML and JSON processing. You have Tmux. You have curl and wget for testing web services. You have man pages available for any of the commands you want to check details. Further instruction for connecting to the cluster will be provided for appropriate tasks. So they will tell you, connect to this cluster and then do this. When no explicit namespace is given, the default namespace should be acted upon. So if they want you to work on a specific namespace, they will tell you in the exam. But if that information is not available, just go ahead with the default namespace. Make sure you read the question at least once or twice, because there could be some, it's not a trick. Nobody has notified us or told us that there's a trick question, but there appears to be trick as you're going through them. And that's a natural thing as well. When you're working on Kubernetes, you might get a lot of scenarios which have multiple solutions. If you need to destroy or recreate a resource to perform a task, it is your responsibility to back up the resource definition appropriately prior to destroying. There is no restore available otherwise. So CKA exam environment will be aligned with the most recent K8 version with approximately 4 to 8 weeks of K8's release date. So make sure before you're going for the exam, if you're prepared and then wait for a few months, make sure you check what is the current version being used, as there could be some major changes. So what are the location requirements for CKA exam? It should be a clutter-free work area, no objects such as paper, writing, implements, electronic devices, or other object on the top of the surface. So your table should be clutter-free. No objects such as paper, trash bin, or objects below the testing surface. So below your table, you should not have any papers, trash bin, or any other objects except the cables connecting your computer. You should have clear walls. So on your walls, you should not have any paper or prints. They are okay with the normal paintings, although it is recommended to not have them. But as long as it's not exam tip, they are pretty much okay with that. It's just you will be spending more time with the proctor, making sure that it's not related to the exam. He will ask you to go to the closer to the image if it is there on the wall. So you might be asked to remove a particular item from the wall if it is relevant to the exam, or proctor deemed it is necessary to maintain the integrity of the exam. You should have a good light so that the proctor can see your face and hands surrounding the work area, but not too bright light behind the examinee. So that might lead to invalidation if they cannot see your face clearly and the movements of your face clearly and hands. So candidate must remain within the camera frame during the exam space, must be private where there is no excessive noise. Public space such as coffee shops, stores, open office environment are not allowed. Please see the candidate handbook for additional covering policies, procedures, and rules during the exam. You're not allowed to cover your face. Even putting your hand on the face, we're going to get you a beeping sound. And if you continue doing it, Proctor might give you warning and further invalidate your session as well. So next is, what are the ID requirements? So before you start your exam, you have to show an ID to the proctor to make sure it's you who are the one attempting the exam and not a proxy. So candidates are required to provide non-expired primary ID that contains candidate photograph, signature, and full name. And see the list of acceptable IDs here. It could be a passport, it could be a driving license, it could be issued in local language or in English. It could be a national identity card, state or province issued card, resident register with photo number card. If candidate full name on their primary ID contain non-Latin characters, then candidate must also provide a non-expired secondary ID containing their full name in Latin, so English and signature, or a notarized English translation of a primary ID along with the non-English characters. So if your ID is not in English, you would have to provide your debit card, credit card, health insurance card, U.S. Social Security card, employee ID card, student IDs, or Japanese health insurance card. So additional, what else can you show? Some government issues IDs such as a passport, driving license, military ID card can maybe a biometric type and may or may not contain a signature. In this case, this primary ID will be acceptable without a signature on the condition that you present a secondary ID as well. So if the primary ID did not have your signature, make sure you have a secondary ID with you. So how is the exam proctored? The certification exam is proctored remotely via streaming audio and video and screen share. So a proctor will be watching your video, your audio, and your screen. And that's pretty much it for the study guide. Those are the things you need to take care of during the exam and before the exam to prepare for it. Let us know how you feel about the study guide. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel for more details as we keep on posting information regarding the exam and Kubernetes and other Python. And we're trying to expand it to the cloud as well. So soon we'll be adding the cloud labs, which will be really helpful for your career. And you also have an option to submit a feedback on the study guide directly on the page. So if you click here, it'll take you to the GitHub, and here you can submit an issue to us or give us a star. So definitely give us a feedback and help improve this guide and tips on Certified Kubernetes Administrator exam. With that, I think there are no questions or comments right now. Feel free to put the comments We will help you in as soon as possible, and we are pretty good at it. So make sure you comment if you have attempted or if you have done the exam and how relevant. Share other tips with us as well. Even if you feel we missed something, add the tips over there. That will really help other candidates. And with that, thank you for your time, guys. Have a good one.